Hello friends, today I'm going over the most brutal shark attacks on rich people. From a bull shark encounter at a private Bahamas island to an oceanic white tip closing in on a diver alone in the Red Sea. But first, we start near Gansby, where a great white destroys a $5 million yacht and eats a billionaire family alive. It was the 8th of March 2016, and the South African summer was winding down along the Western Cape coastline. Water temperatures had been climbing for weeks, pulling seasonal baitfish closer to shore and drawing massive concentrations of Cape fur seals to Dyer Island and Geyser Rock. The channel between the islands, known locally as Shark Alley, was at peak activity, with cage dive operators reporting multiple large great whites pretty much every single day. Aldert Malherbe was a 56-year-old South African-born fintech founder who had sold his company and retired to Cape Town. His net worth sat comfortably in the hundreds of millions. He owned a 72-foot motor yacht valued at approximately $5 million, and he'd been cruising the Western Cape coastline regularly for the better part of a decade. Liesl Malherbe, 51, was his wife, a former corporate attorney turned philanthropist and a strong, confident swimmer. The couple basically treated weekend cruises along this stretch of coast as routine, something they'd done dozens of times without giving it much thought. Aldert kept the yacht provisioned and ready to go at the marina in Simonstown, and during a multi-day cruise along the coast, they'd anchored outside the primary hunting corridor near Kleinby in unusually calm sea conditions. Aldert considered it one of the better anchorages on the Western Cape, sheltered enough to lower the hydraulic swim platform and swim off the stern, which is pretty much the whole reason they kept coming back to this particular spot. The water that afternoon was green tinted with moderate surface visibility due to plankton bloom and seal activity, sandy bottom in roughly 30 feet. The yacht's captain, a contracted professional who had worked for the family 3 seasons, advised against swimming. He pointed out they were close to the channel during peak season and that cage dive boats had been reporting large sharks all month, basically saying, "This is genuinely not a good time to be in this water." Aldert waved it off. They'd swum at this anchorage before without incident, and the cage dive boats operated further into the channel. He and Liesl planned to swim off the stern platform and take the tender to the beach for lunch. The couple entered the water from the yacht's swim platform around 2 p.m. The captain and a crew member monitored from the aft deck near the swim platform in case immediate retrieval became necessary. Honestly, the whole scene just looks so normal. Nice boat, calm water, couple going for a swim on a sunny afternoon. The captain standing right there watching them, and none of it mattered. I realize saying they ignored a warning sounds like a simple story, but it's genuinely not. When you've done the exact same thing a dozen times in the same spot and nothing's ever happened, the warning just stops registering as something real. A large great white, estimated at roughly 14 to 16 feet, had likely been moving through the channel. The yacht's hull, the swim platform activity, and the movements of the 2 swimmers created movement and vibration detectable to a nearby shark under favorable conditions. Great white sharks are one of the largest predatory fish species on Earth, with adults commonly exceeding 15 feet and weights over 2,500 pounds. They are ambush predators that often strike from below in a rapid vertical attack, powerful enough to crush bone and cause fatal blood loss within minutes from a single high-force bite. The Malherbes had been in the water about 10 minutes, swimming near the stern platform. The shark's approach was undetected. The first strike appeared to hit Aldert from below while he floated roughly 15 yards from the yacht. The force lifted him violently at the surface. Investigators later believed the bite struck the lower torso and hip area, causing massive pelvic and vascular trauma. Liesl was about 10 yards away. She saw the disturbance, saw blood spreading rapidly across the surface. She turned and swam toward the yacht platform. The captain and crew member were already moving toward the stern. The shark released Aldert and disappeared beneath the surface. Liesl was swimming toward the platform when the crew spotted the shark circling back toward the stern. The shark struck the lowered hydraulic swim platform from below, the impact buckling the platform mechanism and cracking the transom seal where it met the hull. Water immediately began flooding into the engine compartment through the compromised stern. The platform lurched violently as its hydraulic arms gave way. Liesl, still partially on the collapsing platform, was thrown back into the water. She surfaced screaming in water already heavy with blood. The shark was still in the area. Investigators later believed it struck her once in the confusion before the crew hauled her aboard. Liesl was pulled fully aboard with severe injuries to her left leg. Blood was pooling across the listing deck. The yacht was already listing to stern as water poured through the damaged transom. The bilge alarm sounded almost immediately as the stern dropped lower. The captain attempted to motor toward Kleinby, but the flooding overwhelmed the bilge pumps within minutes. He radioed the local maritime rescue service as the stern settled lower into the water. The crew deployed the tender and transferred Liesel aboard, but the yacht grounded on a sandbar, roughly 200 yards from the anchorage, as the stern went under. Aldert's body was recovered from the water by the maritime rescue crew that arrived shortly after. Aldert had died from catastrophic blood loss from the initial strike. The pelvic and lower torso injuries were likely unsurvivable. Liesel was conscious, but deteriorating rapidly in the tender. Despite the crew applying pressure to her wounds, she lost consciousness before the rescue vessel reached them. She was pronounced dead alongside her husband at Kleinby Harbor. The investigation noted the anchorage's proximity to a well-known seasonal transit route for seals and sharks. The captain's warning was documented. Damage to the yacht's transom and swim platform was photographed and found consistent with a large great white. The yacht was declared a total loss. Authorities did not initiate a cull. A $5 million yacht, half underwater on a sandbar, with the stern gone, and the couple who'd been swimming off it 10 minutes earlier were both dead before the rescue boat reached them. I genuinely cannot get that image out of my head. South Africa's waters took two people who'd anchored in shark territory and dismissed every warning because nothing had ever happened before. The Bahamas took someone who went even further than that. 8 years of the same swim in the same water, and he genuinely could not picture anything in it that would hurt him. It was the 14th of July 2015, and peak summer had settled over the Exuma Cays in the Bahamas. Water temperatures sat in the mid-80s, the shallows shimmering turquoise under cloudless skies. A commercial fishing operation on a neighboring cay ran daily catch cleaning directly into the channel, separating the islands, dumping blood and offal into the water every afternoon. The repeated waste disposal had reportedly increased shark activity in nearby channels and around several docks. Grafton Killick was a 61-year-old hedge fund manager from Greenwich, Connecticut, who owned a private cay in the Exuma chain. He visited 4 to 6 weeks per year and had been coming for over a decade. The island was basically his escape from Manhattan. No phone calls before 9 a.m., no meetings, just the water and the quiet. His property manager, Deverell Sands, 44, was Bahamian-born and lived on the cay year-round, handling maintenance, logistics, and anything else the island required. Killick's morning swim had been identical for 8 years. Off the dock at 6:15 a.m., half-mile loop around the cay's western shoreline, back to the dock by 6:45. He considered the solitary swim part of his routine and had refused escort boats despite Sands' repeated suggestions. Kinda saw it as his time and didn't want anyone else involved. To Killick, the risk was statistical, the kind of number that applies to other people in other places. Sands had warned Killick about the shark situation repeatedly over the previous 2 years. He'd personally seen bull sharks in the channel near the dock at dawn, sometimes 2 or 3 in the same morning, and had documented it with photographs sent to Killick by email. Killick acknowledged the messages but never adjusted his routine. Sands warned him again on the morning of the 14th. Killick dismissed it. He'd never seen a shark during his swim, and that was basically enough for him. 8 years, same dock, same time, same route, same water. And in his head, every single one of those swims was proof that the next one would be fine too. That's how routine gets you. Doesn't make you brave, just makes you blind. The channel between the cays was about 25 feet deep, with a sandy bottom and moderate current. Bull sharks had reportedly been seen repeatedly in the channel for several weeks, drawn by the fish waste runoff from the neighboring operation. Bull sharks are highly adaptable coastal predators associated with a disproportionate number of serious shallow water attacks on humans. Adults commonly reach 8 to 10 feet and weigh roughly 200 to over 500 pounds. Particularly active during dawn and dusk, and repeated fish waste disposal near shorelines can significantly increase their presence in areas they would not otherwise frequent. Killick entered the water at his usual time, and the swim was uneventful for the first 10 minutes as he rounded the western shoreline, swimming a steady crawl about 30 yards offshore in roughly 15 feet of water. Based on Sands' account, watching from the dock with binoculars, as he did most mornings, he saw what appeared to be a large shark moving roughly parallel to Killick in the channel, intermittently visible for several seconds before accelerating. The first bite struck Killick's right leg above the knee. The force dragged him partially underwater. He resurfaced, thrashing. Sands ran for the dock boat. The shark released after the initial bite, but appeared ordered to circle back. Killick was trying to swim towards shore, roughly 20 yards away, when the second strike hit the same leg, tearing deeply through muscle and tissue. A cloud of blood spread rapidly through the water around him. Sands reached him by boat within 3 minutes. He hauled Killick aboard and used a towel and line as an improvised tourniquet high around the leg. The bite had likely damaged the femoral artery. Despite slowing some of the bleeding, Killick was unresponsive by the time the boat reached the dock. He had lost consciousness from combined trauma and blood loss. After stabilization efforts at a local clinic and delays coordinating air evacuation from the outer quays, Killick was airlifted toward Nassau but pronounced dead during the flight. The investigation documented the neighboring fishing operation's waste disposal and the history of bull shark sightings in the channel. No criminal charges were filed, which is pretty standard in these situations since nobody technically broke any laws. The fishing operation was issued a waste management advisory. Sands watched the whole thing through binoculars. The shape in the water, the acceleration, the hit. Got there in 3 minutes with the tourniquet, and it still wasn't enough. How do you process that when you're the guy who warned him for 2 years? The Bahamas took someone who genuinely could not picture anything dangerous in that water. Reunion Island took someone who saw the danger spelled out on a sign, read it, and walked into the water anyway. It was the 19th of April, 2014, and the Indian Ocean swell was running clean along the west coast of Reunion Island, a French overseas territory rough 400 miles east of Madagascar. The island had been in the grip of a devastating shark crisis since 2011, with a string of fatal attacks leading the French government to restrict or prohibit swimming and surfing at many beaches. Red flags and prohibition signs were posted at affected access points. Attacks had been linked primarily to both bull and tiger sharks, and honestly, the whole west coast had basically become a no-go zone for anyone paying attention. Thibault Ravenel was a 47-year-old luxury real estate developer based in Marseille. A competitive surfer in his 20s, he still surfed recreationally and had traveled to Reunion scouting the west coast for a boutique hotel site, kinda combining business with what he figured was a long overdue return to waves he'd surfed in the early 2000s. Back then, the shark situation hadn't been anywhere close to what it was now, and Ravenel pretty much seemed to be operating on that older version of the island in his head, the version where you could just paddle out without thinking twice. He found a bay on the southwest coast that matched his development vision. Posted at the beach access point were red flags and official signs prohibiting all water activities due to shark risk. A local surfer in the parking area told Ravenel directly that the bay had been closed for over a year and that a fatal attack had occurred less than a mile south previous season. Ravenel thanked him, but basically brushed it off, saying he knew these waters and the conditions looked fine. Someone reads a sign that literally says, "People have died here. Do not enter the water," and the response is, "Yeah, but the waves look good." Like, at what point does confidence just become something else entirely? Ravenel paddled out alone in the late afternoon. The water was warm but carried runoff from recent rain, reducing visibility significantly below the surface. The reef below attracted green sea turtle, one of the tiger shark's common natural prey species. These were basically conditions marine authorities had flagged over and over again as high risk for shark encounter. Tiger sharks are considered one of the shark species most frequently involved in serious attacks on humans, responsible for a significant number of fatal attacks worldwide. Adults commonly reach 12 to 14 feet and weigh between 800 and 1,400 pounds. Their serrated teeth are designed to cut through shell, bone, and cartilage. They don't always release after an initial bite, and multiple bite attacks are actually more common with tiger sharks than most other species. Ravenel had been in the water about 20 minutes, sitting on his board roughly 60 yards from shore. The light was fading. The shark apparently approached from behind and below. First strike hit the board and Ravenel's left leg simultaneously, badly cracking the board and tearing deep into his thigh. The impact threw him into the water. The tiger shark appeared to re-engage almost immediately. Scene evidence was considered consistent with multiple impacts or bites during the attack. The attack took place in approximately 8-12 feet of water over the reef. Ravenel was recovered from the water by a coastal rescue unit dispatched from roughly a mile north, arriving roughly 20 minutes later after a fisherman on the cliffs reported seeing the disturbance from above. The initial injuries likely incapacitated Ravenel almost immediately, with drowning occurring before rescuers arrived. The investigation confirmed Ravenel entered the water at a beach that had been officially closed for over a year. Prohibition signs and red flags documented as clearly visible. The local surfer who warned him provided a statement. Authorities identified the shark as most likely a tiger shark based on regional attack history, witness accounts from the fishermen above, and wound characteristics. Wildlife officials did not attempt to locate the animal. That fisherman up on the cliff watching the whole thing from above couldn't do a single thing. just standing up there, seeing the water go red, knowing exactly what it means. Reunion took someone who read the signs and walked past them. The Red Sea took someone who followed every rule, did everything right, and still ended up alone on the surface with nothing underneath him but open water. It was the 3rd of November, 2017, and the late autumn sun sat low over the southern Egyptian Red Sea. The offshore reefs south of Marsa Alam drew experienced divers for dramatic wall dives along coral drop-offs that plunged into deep blue water. The area was also known for Oceanic white-tip sharks, a pelagic species that basically patrols the open water beyond the reef edge. Vadim Kuznetsov was a 29-year-old son of a Russian industrial magnate, traveling with 2 friends on a private liveaboard charter along the southern coast. He was a certified advanced open water diver with about 50 log dives, competent enough for recreational wall diving, but still pretty inexperienced with strong currents and deep drift dives. He carried a GoPro on every dive and honestly spent more time filming than actually watching what was going on around him, something the guide had already spoken to him about on 2 previous dives during the trip. The liveaboard anchored at a reef known for strong currents. The dive guide, an experienced Egyptian who knew the local systems well, briefed the group on the plan. Descend along the wall to about 80 feet, drift south with the current, then ascend along the wall and surface near the boat. He stressed staying close to the wall and maintaining visual contact at all times. The group descended. The current was stronger than forecast, and over several minutes it carried the group further along the wall than planned. Kuznetsov fell behind while filming a school of barracuda, and when he looked up, the others had drifted around a bend in the wall and were no longer visible. This one genuinely scares me more than the others because Kuznetsov wasn't reckless. He just made one bad call under pressure and that was it. One decision and everything changed. Instead of attempting to relocate the wall and rejoin the drift route, Kuznetsov abandoned the wall and ascended directly into open water. He surfaced alone, roughly 300 feet from the reef edge. The liveaboard was intermittently obscured by swell and distance, and the water beneath him dropped from the reef wall into deep, open water. Oceanic white-tip sharks are historically associated with numerous open water disaster fatalities, particularly involving shipwrecks and downed aircraft. Adults reach 8 to 10 feet and weigh between 150 and 350 pounds. Unlike reef sharks that tend to flee from humans, oceanic whitetips are notably persistent and investigative around isolated swimmers or divers. They approach slowly and deliberately, circling at close range, often making several close passes before escalating to physical investigation. Kuznetsov was floating on the surface, inflating his surface marker buoy and scanning for the boat. A pale shape with distinctive white-tipped fins appeared briefly beneath him, partially visible through the water column, then disappeared. The white tip returned, making several close passes, closing distance incrementally each time. Kuznetsov attempted to stay vertical in the water and keep facing the shark. On one pass, the shark bumped him with its snout. The shark disappeared momentarily, then came back from a different angle. After several increasingly close passes over the next minute, the shark suddenly lunged. The shark struck high on his thigh, biting deeply before pulling away. Kuznetsov kicked and struck at the shark's head. It released, circled, and bit again, this time hitting his arm. The second bite caused severe arterial damage in the forearm, likely involving the brachial artery. Combined with the leg wounds, the blood loss was rapid and overwhelming. The dive guide surfaced with the rest of the group near the reef wall about 4 minutes after Kuznetsov. They spotted his surface marker and motored the dinghy toward his position. By the time they reached him, the water around the marker was clouded. Kuznetsov was barely responsive, drifting in and out of consciousness. The crew recovered Kuznetsov and began emergency treatment aboard the liveaboard. He lost consciousness during recovery efforts and could not be revived. He was pronounced dead after transfer to emergency services at the Marsa Alam port. The investigation documented the strong current conditions and diver separation. The liveaboard operator cooperated fully, and the dive guide's briefing and protocols were reviewed and found adequate. The recovered footage documented the separation but did not capture the attack itself. No shark mitigation response was undertaken. 4 minutes. The guide surfaced 4 minutes later, and it was already done. I keep wondering if there's any version where 4 minutes would have been fast enough, and I really don't think so. The Red Sea took someone who surfaced in the wrong place at the wrong time. New Zealand's waters took someone who picked the right place, he just didn't know what was already in it. It was the 17th of January, 2013, and midsummer had settled over the far south of New Zealand. Stewart Island sat at the bottom of the South Island, surrounded by cold, nutrient-rich waters that supported one of the country's most productive marine ecosystems. The Fovo Strait between the islands was home to large populations of New Zealand fur seals, and the waters around Stewart Island included some exceptionally large great white individuals drawn by the seal colonies. Callum Ferrier was a 63-year-old retired Royal Navy officer from Plymouth, England, on a solo sailing voyage around New Zealand's South Island. An accomplished seaman, meticulous in his planning, thoroughly comfortable working alone on the water, his 38-foot sailing yacht carried him through some of the roughest waters in the southern hemisphere without incident. By all accounts, Ferrier was the kind of sailor who checked everything twice and never took shortcuts on the water. Ferrier anchored in a sheltered bay on the eastern coast. 3 weeks of sailing had left the hull coated with growth that was slowing the boat. He planned to scrape the waterline from a small inflatable dinghy tied alongside. The bay appeared sheltered and tranquil. One of those spots that honestly just looks completely harmless from the deck of a boat. Seals were visible on rocks at the entrance roughly 300 yards away, hauled out in the sun in groups of 20 or 30. Ferrier noted them in his log, but genuinely considered the distance sufficient. He had done hull maintenance in harbors and anchorages around the world, and had no reason to believe this particular task posed any unusual risk. The danger simply wasn't something he associated with the activity. What gets me is he genuinely didn't connect what he was doing with any kind of shark risk. Scraping a hull in a quiet bay, in his head those were two completely separate categories of thing. Ferrier changed into a wetsuit and entered the water with a scraping tool, working along the hull at the waterline. His legs hung below the surface. The movement, vibration, and contrast at the surface likely drew investigative attention from any large predator in the area. Great white sharks in New Zealand waters include some exceptionally large individuals, drawn to the country's extensive seal colonies. They are ambush predators that approach from below in low light or high contrast conditions. A person in a dark wetsuit at the waterline of a vessel, with legs dangling below the surface, creates movement and vibration patterns that may attract investigative passes from large sharks. Vibrations from scraping on a hull can travel efficiently through water and may attract nearby sharks. No witnesses were present, and the entire sequence was reconstructed from scene evidence by investigators. Based on damage patterns on the dinghy and evidence recovered at the scene, investigators believe the shark likely struck from below, striking Ferrier's lower body as he hung at the waterline. The dinghy's port tube was punctured and partially deflated, consistent with a large shark bite. Blood evidence on the hull indicated the initial strike occurred at the waterline. The scraping tool was later recovered floating beside the yacht, apparently dropped during the attack. Blood evidence and disturbance around the swim ladder suggested Ferrier may have attempted to climb back aboard. The yacht was found the following day by a fishing vessel transiting the bay. The dinghy was partially deflated and hanging from its painter line. Blood residue was present on the hull and swim ladder. Ferrier's body was not recovered. Scene evidence was consistent with a fatal shark attack, most likely involving a great white based on the location, bite dimensions on the dinghy, and proximity to seal colonies. Local police and wildlife authorities investigated. Ferrier's sailing log documented his plans to scrape the hull that day. His emergency beacon had not been activated, suggesting Ferrier likely had little or no time to activate it. Local boating groups later circulated informal safety warnings about in-water hull work near seal colonies. The scraping tool just floating there next to the yacht, the blood on the ladder where he almost made it back up, his log open below deck with the day's plans written out in his own handwriting. I've gone through a lot of these by now, and this is the one where the aftermath just sits in my chest and won't move. Thanks for checking out today's video. If you did like the video, go ahead and click like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.